2v8 can be fun. It's chaotic, it's complete sensory overload where wacky shenanigans can happen. Getting chased while 4 of your teammates spin in circles trying to find the next generator has undoubtedly been the consistent experience that I have had with the game mode. Without needing to worry about meta perks or consistently even meta killers, combined with a gargantuan blood point bonus on the survivor side, it's not hard to understand why the majority of players who play this game more casually want to keep it in. And even though the quote tweets regarding prior extensions of the event are largely negative, a lot of the replies are positive, so there's even a vocal portion of people reaffirming that letting the game mode return has been the right decision. I'm pointing this out because I want to make it exceptionally clear that there are perfectly fine arguments to pose in favor of keeping 2v8 in the game. From where I'm sitting though, 2v8 has made DBD on a whole feel a lot worse to play. The core of my problems with 2v8 arise from how it doesn't properly represent what's fun about Dead by Daylight. When I'm playing Survivor, most of the enjoyment that I get out of learning the role is learning how to loop killers properly, possibly in combination with a small utility belt of perks that accelerate other parts of the game, holding proper distance, maintaining check spots, winning 50-50s, and managing to do all that against unique powers or crackhead playstyles. All of these things are measurable skills in DBD that I like to learn and improve on. I know that I'm not good at Survivor in the slightest, so these are things that I can educate myself with, and I like being able to make adjustments throughout a game according to my mistakes. When I play Survivor in 2v8, I often feel as if I don't have to learn anything, nor do I have to have a unique playstyle. I am not rewarded for understanding how to hold check spots on Shack or any other common tile for that matter, because of how awash the map is with free pallets. I can run one location for a single loop and break away to the next pallet nearby because the entire map is littered with them. The funny thing is that they're not even good pallets, as most of them are on typical filler pallet locations, some of which never appear in the main map anyway, so it does very little in the way of helping you understand how the map is played. If the killers decide to collaborate on knocking me down though, then I've also learned nothing, because even being able to try and gamble 50-50s is nearly impossible when there's 2 of them. The different classes, while a cool-ish balance against everyone bringing Dead Hard and Vigil every game, feels somewhat ineffectual. You get one nice sprint burst off, and that's cool. You get to heal a lot quicker and kind of in a burst area of effect, and that's cool. But beyond that, the practical application and ways they weave into every individual match doesn't change a whole lot. If I bring botany knowledge with Deliverance in a regular game, I know that I want to play cautiously and to emphasize getting unhooks. With the Medic class, I heal everyone in sight and don't have to make many adjustments because of how the map with its excess pallets is played. If I'm not actively in chase as well, the best that I can do is slam generators. And I'll be honest with you fellas, I don't think that holding M1 in a stationary location is a fun gameplay component. When I'm healing, it's a necessary component of getting my team back in the game, all in service of recuperation. Generators, on the other hand, are an even more binary component of the game. Is the killer nearby? If not, hold M1. Now granted, this is how Survivor is played in other games too, but as I mentioned earlier, there's no learning how to win a chase in 2v8, and the main objective isn't much better either. The difference is that there are fewer targets in 1v4, practically encouraging me to blend stealthy gameplay with proper map knowledge in order to be the most efficient on the generators. There's a trade-off here that 2v8 takes very much for granted. I also didn't love how almost every Survivor game I played against a few months ago was against a Legion. I'm kind of glad that they've been removed from 2v8 now, though it does suck for killer players. But normal queues aren't much better between every S-tier killer and the occasional sprinkling of a lower tier killer themselves, but when the one fun thing to learn about Survivors is reduced to Rebel by the 2v8 game mode, it sucks twice as much to face 2 killers whose powers just make it so that you can't really engage in chases anyway. The problem is that playing Legion was super fun from the killer's perspective. You ran around, you stabbed a bunch of people, you just kind of chased after the nearest heartbeat. It was overstimulating and very much a turn your brain off kind of character in a self-indulgent way. When the killer had to and still has to wait 22 plus minutes to get into a game, you can be pretty certain that there are very few people out there who are rubbing their hands together because they're excited to play the Wraith in this game mode. And as someone who finds killer far more engaging to play, having to play a watered down version of Survivor in exchange for a killer match feels like punishment in and of itself. I could always choose to not play Survivor, and honestly, I'd probably get more chores done while waiting for matches, but then again, I could just not play 2v8 in general. So let me hop on over to regular killer queues where there's still a 7-minute wait in between games. Now, I'll admit that I don't live in the most populous region of the United States. When 2v8 splits the queues down the middle, there's hardly enough Oregonians playing 1v4 to fill the counter at a dive bar. What ends up happening, though, is that after these several minute queues go through for killer, it's likely that I will run into people who are at higher MMR reaches and who have been facing killers that have been giving their absolute best in every single game. People who are higher MMR know how to play this game efficiently, and what that often means is that all the generators will be done in less than 6 minutes if I so dare to misstep, and if I'm not running gem regression, and if I choose not to tunnel. I very rarely run more regression than surge or turn back the clock in my builds because I think that killers have more interesting options that can complement their playstyles. And I don't mind a difficult game here and there, but it's highly disappointing to feel like I'm not given room to experiment with new builds or killers because every group of survivors I'm facing up against in 1v4 are now used to playing against the best of the best. These survivors are used to seeing Blight and Kaneki with quad slowdown every match, or that really annoying Hex-based build with Henry every single match, and so they're usually approaching most games with the assumption that every game will be an uphill battle. And so then my response is to either shut the game off or feed into the problem. If I want good results, I guess the best thing I can do is play a high-tier killer, which then forces survivors to play their hearts out even more, which then causes more killer players to abandon killers they enjoy if they're not getting consistent results, and, well, you can see where it all spirals out from there. I'm getting a little off track from 2v8 itself, but the reason why this conversation spirals out so heavily is because this domino effect is often what happens when these alternate game modes are introduced. With 2v8 being a game mode that devolves into monotony rather quickly, I try to play the regular game, and then the regular game queues are just awful. And when I have been playing Survivor during these times, though, I run into killers whose queue times was several minutes long, and they definitely don't want the game to be shorter than the time that they queued for. In fact, while 2v8 has been running in its most recent iteration, I've foolishly been gathering data on perk and map variety for both killers and survivors, and my ability to play survivor is, well, it's not good. If you thought my killer gameplay was bad on anything that isn't Deathslinger, and even then my relative skill level is pushing it, my survivor gameplay leaves a lot to be desired. In short, it feels like the killers are a lot meaner than I expected, but they're also generally not great at the game. I have seen so many players attempt to let their perks carry for them while also fundamentally misunderstanding how or why a tunneling or camping playstyle is supposed to work for them before my team gets at least 2 survivors out the door. I played against a Bubba that tried to camp in the basement on Rotten Fields in the year of our Lord 2026, which ended with us still getting 3 people out. I played against a Clown that both camped and tunneled one of our players with the Blood Warden no-ed build, and we still got 2 people out in the endgame. I played against a couple of Deathslingers, both of whom made the grave error of giving up their chases constantly. And side note, if there are any of you who want me to teach you how to play Deathslinger, drop some gameplay in this channel on my Discord server so that I can critique it for a video someday. I genuinely don't play Survivor that often, but the number of people that seemed desperate for good results in the games that I played felt higher than normal. Sure, it's merely anecdotal evidence, but I just can't shake the feeling that 2v8 has stressed out the players who feel the same way as I do, that the game mode just isn't interesting anymore, but you also don't want to embarrass yourself after an extremely long 1v4 queue. Furthermore, I've seen some discussion from other people on Twitter that 2v8 tends to skew extremely survivor-sided. If you bring 2 medic players, you can instantly heal an entire group of survivors once every 2 minutes. If you bring just 1 escapist class, that's a guaranteed sprint burst on a group of survivors every 30 seconds with only a 20-second exhaustion timer. And as Staggy's pointed out in his tweet, there's a possible incentive for killers to not do well in the early game, as the stacking generator buff might lead to easier comebacks for the survivors. And on top of all that, one of the things that 2v8 has allowed for has been collaboration between killer mains like you haven't seen before with Dead by Daylight, which is kind of cool. Included in that collaboration is coordination, as you would with Survivor gameplay. In this most recent iteration of 2v8, I was watching Bran, aka the Mr. Headache, stream 2v8 with Canatover. Since they were more or less playing off of each other and somewhat coordinating attacks on survivors, they had so many people join their streams afterwards to insult them, supposedly for the sin of ruining the fun of 2v8. 2v8 is not a fun game mode. is an extremely diluted version of what makes DBD complex and fun, wherein the low bar to entry and explosivity deludes you into believing that this is anything but 6 minutes of key jangling in between 20+ minute killer queues. At least with 1v4 you have the option of feeling smart for playing stealthily on occasion, or for reading killer movements correctly, or for swinging an advantage for yourself that could otherwise be in a sparsely populated game. You just don't get that with 2v8. And I can already see how some people might be rejoicing over the fact that killers have difficulties closing out games in these queues as well, as if their fun isn't reliant on the risk of losing, which there's even less in this game mode. I mean, I don't know where else to really put this rant statement, but this community can just be so rotten and vitriolic sometimes. 2v8 feels like it splits the community, and its rippling effects are miserable every time because it feels like I'm just an unpaid entertainer at a children's party. I am burnt out on 2v8, and I hope we get a longer break between this version and the next.